how do I ask to get considered for promotion? Full context. Paano mo communicate na we are ready to move up and pag nagka-opportunity, makonsider sana tayo without sounding arrogant or impatient? Siyempre, dictated by demand din naman yung promotion. Basta, nasigurado lang na maiisip kapag may opening na. And siguro maganda rin malaman kung ano pa ang kailangan ma-develop para ready na when it time comes. Okay. Who shall go first?
Thank you for the full context.
Yes, very comprehensive.
Oo, kasi doon pa lang sa first question, how do I ask to get considered for a promotion? That is a workshop in and of itself. Let me respond first by saying this. There are two main factors I feel. Well, from what I'm reading here. One is there's a system concern, and two, there's the actual performance behavioral concern.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? One thing is you have to know enough about your system so that you know what are the requirements to be able to get promoted.
Right.
And let's face it, right? It's reality. There are some systems where it's more merit-based. People can get promoted within a position.
Sure.
Right? And then with rewards and responsibilities. And then there are other systems which are more position-based.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's bottom line it. I won't mince words here. Meaning you'll get promoted when the person above you retires. So you gotta know your system. Right? Why? Because here, sinabi niya, di ba? Dictated by demand din naman yung promotion. Basta masigurado lang maisip kapag may opening na. That's something you have to either accept, right? Or if you can do something about it in your situation. Right. Because then you could be doing all that you can to be considered for promotion, but if the person above you, all right, has if there's no position for you to promote into, okay, you want to stay in your department. Mm-hmm. The person above you, maybe he's your direct superior, has no intention, nowhere near retiring age, and management has no plans for that person except to keep him there. It's going to take a while.
Right.
So either you look for another department for you to move up in or another position, right? So this is what I mean, right? You got to know your system with what is not and what is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that having said, right, what you do have the power to focus on, right? Of course, you can influence the system a little bit, but that might take some time. What you do have more control over is your own performance behavioral factors, right? How I show up and how I do the work, how I work with other people. Because let me also bottom line it. Diba? Not much. For the awareness of all the leaders and managers out there. So this person, if you're doing a really good job, but the system doesn't allow you for the promotion,
mm-hmm.
your skills and accomplishments can get recognized outside of your organization. Meaning you can get promoted by getting hired for a better position, not where you currently are.
That's true.
Right? So it's again, but if you do love the company where you are, this is a conversation to have. Because I know full well that there are people, they do want to get promoted and they do love the organization where they are in.
Right.
But if the system doesn't support that, right? So yes, talk about the system, talk about possibilities, but even before that, you gotta have your performance, solid.
And I think if I may jump in there, Lippy, I love how you set it up and how you recognize the two sides. There is the system, maybe the processes, even the needs. You know how when I was in big corporate, one of the things I often heard was business need. You know how they promote based on business need. Sorry?
Even the criteria, Pao.
Yes,
For example, you were working in corporate. Did you know what were the requirements?
Absolutely.
What boxes did you have to check to be promoted? Because I worked in a company before where the only box I had to check was my boss would love me and recommend me for the position. So it can either be as, and we hope that the criteria for promotion in your place is, what am I saying here? The more empirical, the more measurable it is, the better it is for you.
Right.
And because right? Because these
you have to know.
Correct. These boxes correspond to what it is I need to do to be able to be promoted.
And I think in relation to that, it also pays for us to have a good understanding of the position that we want to get promoted into. Now, again, there are possible ways into this. So, and I've been in both in my own experience in my younger days. The first one, and perhaps the least, I'll just call it the least mature without being insulting, is the simply, I just want to get promoted. I think I'm deserving of getting promoted because I've been working so hard, because I've been able to deliver the following, because I've been so successful. And maybe
because si ganyan na batchmate ko does less
Pwede.
work than me, siya na-promote, bakit ako hindi na-promote? Diba?
Pwede.
Variety of different
and
reasons.
I felt that. And at times it is warranted, maybe not a promotion. And I think that's one of the things that we need to recognize there. Maybe it's not promotion. Maybe it's recognition in terms of a merit increase, in terms of maybe a reward. If it's not, if the company systems don't allow for the merit increase at that point. Because one thing that many people miss out on, and I missed out on this when I was younger, is that getting promoted doesn't simply mean doing a good job where we are now. Because the reality is sometimes what got you here is not going to work in the next job. So for example, if the promotion means moving up to a managerial position where we are in charge of people, and we're coming from an individual contributor position, we're an analyst, we're an expert, we're a specialist,
That's right.
then the skills in the next job that maybe we're aiming for are going to be entirely different. Being an expert at programming, being an expert at the job we do analysis, even as a brand manager. For example, being an expert at marketing, creating commercials, creating digital content, guiding the agency, that's very different from the requirements of perhaps someone who's going to be managing 5 people.
Yeah,
Because
that's true.
then you say it's about people development, people growth, and it's no longer about just the nitty-gritty. It's about people, and it's about career pathing, for example.
It's a totally different game. And maybe you've heard of the phrase, and maybe some of you have heard of that, right? Where sometimes we promote people to fail because they're great. They're great individual contributors, but then when you give them a team, they try to still be an individual contributor, not knowing you gotta put out the results, right? In utilizing your team and people, it's not just you.
Right.
It's not just you doing the work, so to speak. And this is where the 6 critical practices are. That's where our course also comes in, because it was expressly designed to teach people who would be transitioning from a individual contributor expert role into a managerial leadership role, right? And Raymond says it's a good point. Investing in yourself, you can decide if the ROI of staying company is worth your investment and time. So it's also scanning and Pao, maybe you'd want to read. So Sydney has also dropped another wisdom bomb.
Sure.
Wisdom bomb in our comment.
So Sydney says, it's important to understand where the organization is in terms of its talent needs. Absolutely. What is the need of the organization? The easiest to know are the technical details.
Correct.
Performance, vacancies, potential, and so on. But the organization needs to be adaptive, not technical, to thrive. For example, in this period of exponential change and in a volatile, so VUCA, basically, environment, the need for key talents needs to change accordingly. So the formula for talent movement cannot be the same every year. And I think that that's a very big amen there, especially in this new context. We keep calling it the new normal. Then I think it also, and I hope I'm right here in interpreting what Sydney said, it also challenges us individually and as organizations to say, there are new ways of attacking things, of looking at our needs, looking at what we want. So the need for talents needs to change. So the formula for talent movement cannot be the same every year. This is the unspoken reality which every employee needs to understand. So the employee has to keep scanning the internal and external environment, including other forces that affect talent decisions. Absolutely. We cannot expect that what we saw our colleague benefit from 5 years ago will hold true today, because it's a very different environment now.
Or even a year ago.
Right.
That
In
was
fact,
not,
if we were to just look around and if we were to see the number of senior managers and up, director level, who are below 30, in their early 30s, and compare it to even just 20 years ago when director level was for what? 40-year-olds and above.
Yeah.
That in itself is indicative of the changes that have happened. But with that, and I think it's very tempting for some of the younger people to say, well, my friend did it at 30. I want to do it at 32. You brought up the point earlier of promoting to fail. if we're not ready, if we're not equipped, if we as the person who's going after that promotion is not aware of what the demands of the next job, of the next position are going to be, then we may very well be going after our own failure. And this is not to discourage people from wanting to be promoted. It's just open our eyes, be aware to, as
And
Sydney points out, the
and
need.
in our discussion, we've in a way, I'm feeling we're mixing the perspectives for both company and the
Yes.
individual, right? Because it's also companies that, and this is what Sid is also telling us. The pandemic changed talent skills requirements overnight. Talent will keep changing very fast, so we need to learn fast, right? So this is from a company perspective. People are changing, people are shifting quickly. At the same time, us as companies, me as a manager, I've gotta match up to that shift so I can know how to better manage and lead, and even hire and develop the people within a company context. That being said, I wanna go into Michelle's comment because this leads me to a point I want to make for the individual. Someone shared with me before and it stuck with me. We are the captain of our own career and we are ultimately responsible for our own actions and the direction we choose to go. Others may help us and move things, yes, but we always have a choice. Speak up about where you want to go and let your leaders give you the opportunities and equip you with what it takes to get there. So yeah, I love how Michelle's saying this.
Absolutely.
For me, how it's landing is the impact here. It's really own your career.
Yes.
If your company is not going to give you an opportunity to move up, and if you're confident, you feel you're ready to move up. This is where the internal and external environment scanning that Sid is saying, the opportunity, the promotion might not be within your own department or within your own company. It could be in a department within the company. Or if it's a company itself that's not giving the opportunity, maybe it's in another company. I don't know, right? What I do know is that at the end of the day, our career is something that we have and we've got to own it and make choices about it.
Right. And I think one of the first choices we need to make here is, again, I'll go back to something I brought up earlier, to just raise our hand. Because sometimes, and I know people and I know myself having done this before, sometimes we expect that I feel like I deserve to be promoted. So my boss should see it too. And I keep quiet. And when it doesn't come, and another year passes and another year passes,
How
I
dare
sit
you?
there,
How
see
dare
the
he
ending.
not? How dare he
Grabe.
not realize it? How dare
Yes.
he?
And sometimes it's just a matter of raising our hands and saying, I'd like to move on to the next position. But then with that comes the question also, what will it take?
Yes. What's going to be your contribution?
Right. And we need to be ready to have that hard discussion and that hard conversation where we ask, how ready do you think I am? And if, let's say, our supervisor says you're not ready, then we ask the second question. What will it take for me to be ready? Or what makes you feel I'm not yet ready? Because it may expose us to the reality that we really aren't equipped. Or perhaps if we feel we are equipped, we haven't been given the opportunity to show how equipped we are.
That's a good, having that discussion is really a great, because it will provide clarity with what is my boss looking for when it comes to promoting me. Again, guys, think about it. If you were the boss, would you promote someone who is not ready and you'll have to clean up after?
Yes.
I don't think any boss, would. So it's getting an understanding, right? Because sometimes it could be the boss that doesn't have an understanding if this person is promotable or not. But at the end of the day, having a discussion will help clarify stuff and will help, will provide you a venue to voice out, right? That, hey, and besides, what could be more motivating or challenging to have to tell your boss and have your boss watch you because you told your boss, I want to get promoted. What will it take?
Right. And I think with that point, so a few things, I'll just summarize here what I think we've been saying is, number one, bring it up. Say that I feel I want to be promoted. I feel I deserve to be promoted. And coming into that conversation, that discussion, it's probably going to be several discussions. Be ready with a number of things. What makes us feel that we're ready? What are our accomplishments? What are our aspirations even? Because it has to be clear what our aspirations are. For example, although this is probably old news, someone who wants to specialize in marketing, for example, you're probably just moving up the marketing ladder. Same for everything else, HR, sales, marketing. On the other hand, if you want to lead the company eventually, then there has to be an openness to also be moved laterally to another function.
Agree.
So for example, if I'm from marketing, I one who's actually been in that position. I dreaded that because I didn't want to go out on route rides
or supply chain or accounting or HR. You got, again, it's about having a big picture.
Exactly.
Well, so if I'm hearing here, I'm assuming, right? If you're saying you want to be promoted, I'm assuming it's being promoted into a management or into a leadership position. You've got to take a wider perspective,
Absolutely.
that position already.
And I think the way you put it, Lippy, is great because in reality, the higher up you go, the broader that perspective has to be. It can no longer be just about this is my job. Because the higher up you go, the more accountable, the more interested you will be in what the others are doing, what the others are contributing, and what the bigger challenges are for the organization. Now, I think Sid brings up a very valid point here. He says the pandemic changed the talent, skills, requirements overnight. And that's true. Requirements have changed overnight. The things that used to work perhaps no longer work as well.
What we took for
For
granted
example,
back then. So back to
yes,
that skill of empathy is now ever so much more in demand and so much more valued. The ability
right,
to empathize and have empathy with the people that you're working with and the people you're serving, definitely.
right. For example, just to take it from the perspective of a salesman, for example, there are people who are good salespeople because they're great at face-to-face interaction. The firm handshake, the proximity, the willingness to be close to people that they really don't know very well, and yet to behave like they're close and they're to create
Yeah,
that
yeah.
bond. Now, this new setup, working from home, working through webcams, just takes that out of the picture. In fact, just a while ago, I saw one of my friends post on his, I think it was his Facebook thread. It was an old ad from, I think, Warren Buffett, who said, "When was the last time you did a firm handshake over the phone?" And of course, that was years ago. And the challenge there was, I think, the message of Warren Buffett was, you make deals, you make success face to face. And of course, nowadays, it challenges it. And I think that pretty much emphasizes the point Sydney made here, is that years ago, that made perfect sense. I would have said, yes, absolutely, face to face is the way to make an impact, is the way to do things. But right now, we don't have the handshake. We don't even have the, what was early on called the Corona elbow. Most people aren't willing to do
Corona
that
elbow.
right now.
So that's right. And and one of the things that I'm thinking, and one of the forecast, I don't know, fearless forecasts, as some of my friends say, is that after this year of lockdown, work from home, right? Even after everyone has gotten vaccinated and we've solved this virus, not everything is going to go back to to what
The
was
old ways.
before, to what was
Yes.
before, definitely. So that's right. So talent has changed and requirements have shifted, maybe even for good.
And I think, Lippy, I'll just touch on something that I know is close to both our hearts here. So Lippy and I are trained in strengths. And one of the things we say there is that one of the things we learned is that each of us has strengths. And the mix of those strengths is pretty much unique for all of us. It's almost safe to say that there's almost no one else in the world who has the same mix of strengths. And I think one of the realizations here is that together with that recognition and perhaps even that comfort in our own strengths, is we also need to have a growth mindset, which means the willingness to leverage on those strengths, to bring those strengths into play in new ways, and not to always rely on the old ways we've done things, because the strength can remain the same. Like, I can think strategically, I can be very organized, I can be a problem solver, but it doesn't always have to be the same way. We can bring those strengths and talents out in new ways, in different ways. And perhaps if there were a plus side to this pandemic, or if there were plus sides, I think that would be one of them, is that it challenges each of us to grow in that way, to know ourselves and what we can bring to the table, and to recognize that we can change, and it doesn't mean that we're any less valuable. In fact, we can make ourselves even more valuable, even more impactful, and bring bigger contributions to the table if we're
Nice.
willing to change.
Well said, Pao. Well said. Bonus na yung you're telling your children all these years after and starting your sentence with, alam mo, nung pandemic.
Hi. Well, a few comments here. Sorry, I'll just jump into the chat section here if you don't mind it.
See it.
So from Cabs Bert, working in a company that is flexible, highly responsive to changes in the environment should make one team member work in sync with changes to the job requirements. Be flexible himself in terms of adaptability to other jobs within the company. That's true. And just going back to something Lippy and I mentioned earlier, in this respect, I think conversations help greatly in terms of bringing that flexibility, bringing an understanding of both sides to the table. Because in this environment, especially since we don't see each other face to face, since we don't have the benefit of the nonverbal communications of before, where we would see how people are behaving even if they're not talking to us, it's absolutely more important to have conversations, to ask questions, and to be curious about what the other people are going through, perhaps what their expectations are, because we may be making assumptions that are way, way out of line if we don't ask the right questions.
Cabs is also sharing that promotability takes a different character now. It is even made more challenging if the company one is working with is constrained by its bottom line picture.
Absolutely.
The virtues of patience, fortitude, and creativity would help one strengthen himself to gain more ways to move up in the ladder. You know what I want to add to what Cabs is saying is that, you know, if you promoted, you become a manager. A manager is a position, right? But you don't need the position to exercise leadership.
That's true.
In fact, it's that exercise of leadership, of influencing things for the better, of speaking up, of leading yourself first well and being proactive with your choices. Right? That will begin to get the gears turning. Besides, you know, just to be simply practical about it, when you become a manager, leadership is the first quality and skill that will be asked of you if you want to perform well. Right? So why not practice, right? And then make that as part of what you present to share and to, in a way, you know, for the lack of a better term, to prove your promotability.
Right. And I think to jump off on that, you mentioned it's all about leadership. And I think it starts with self-leadership, as we've kept hammering on
that's
this
the
whole
phrase.
Conversation.
So for the connection for today's afternoon, right, is about self-leadership really. Whether it's about self-leadership making an impact, self-leadership adapting to situation, which includes taking care of ourselves.
Right. And I think after that, or once we have that sense of self-leadership, or at least the recognition of the need for it in place, is also when we get to the external side, the organizational side, is we also need to recognize that when it comes to promotion, not only will we have maybe better benefits, more authority, more decision-making power, higher pay, but at the same time, the expectation in terms of the level of accountability increases. And sometimes that's what we miss. We feel like we can reason out the same way as before. We can say, you know what, I don't feel like it. The higher up you go, the smaller the space for that becomes, because the expectation of accountability becomes greater.
Higher, yeah. Well said. I mean, that's, if you think to, I'm thinking of a quote. You know, as the movie Spider-Man, you know, forever and ever. People, you know, sometimes I remember there was this 2-year stretch where people always say that, as it was said in the movie Spider-Man. As it was said in the movie Spider-Man. It was like the quote itself started with that. As it was said in the movie, you know,
right.
With great power comes great responsibility. Which is really the real quote, right? Really,
right.
For whom much is given, much is expected. And if you move up, what is given in droves is authority. The authority to make the decisions, to make the calls, to influence people, not just on a leadership, emotional, directional level, but even on a policy, strategic, and sign the paper on the dotted line level. Right? You have that influence when you become a man, as you move up in position.
And the flip side of that, the other edge of that is that with that authority, with that power, also comes the accountability for these people. So no longer can we say, si Lippy kasi, si Lippy yung gumawa niyan. Because eventually, it will come back and say, yes, but Lippy reports to you. And you're accountable for him. Of course, the decision was Lippy's, but the accountability, there will always be that part that will come back to us, especially if we lead people, if we're leaders of teams and organizations. Raymond says something here. We may be physically distant, but the digital workplace keeps us connected 24/7, which allows us to share thoughts, feelings, and share intention to act alone or collaborate with others. Absolutely. It takes choosing.
And you know, Raymond, this is thank you for describing our current setup in its best version. Because in its worst version is the weekends feel like lunch breaks. That's the worst version, right? It's so easy to connect with other people, which means it's so easy to send an email and expect an answer at 1 a.m. in the morning.
Sydney has another
Even
thing
1,
here.
1 a.m., that's too extreme. Fine, let's make it a little bit closer to send an email and expect an answer 6:30 p.m. How's that?
That's borderline, right?
Yeah, right. But the 6:30 p.m. turns into 7, turns into
Yes.
8, you know what I
And
mean?
if you reply at 6:30, you expect a reply at 7, then you expect
Yeah.
to reply at 7:30.
It's a vicious cycle there.
Yes. And I think there, again, we go back to the need to make choices for ourselves and lead ourselves first and foremost. Sydney has another nugget of wisdom.
Another wisdom bomb.
Lippy, would you like to?
I love the growth mindset. But some people are also fixated with growing in knowledge and skills. Yes. For people, communities, organizations, and the bigger world, it is about creation of value that makes people's lives better now and in the future. So leadership cannot stop at personal and interpersonal growth. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
We need to stretch it to be able to exercise leadership where we uplift lives of others at managerial, organization, and social levels, which you will feel if you have been on this journey or you've started this journey. It becomes a natural pull. As I begin to develop more leadership over myself, the invitation is to extend and to use the leadership to positively influence other people, whether directly or indirectly.
And I think if I were to, and I'm bringing in multiple sources or reference here, so to speak, but the one closest to my mind right now is Seth Godin, where, and I'm not quoting this very precisely, but he says that really it's all about understanding what is the need, what is the value that's being asked for, and then maybe asking the question, how can I address that? What can I best bring to the table? Because as Sydney points out, it shouldn't just be about knowledge and skills. And Sydney, let me know if I'm extending your thought correctly here, if I'm going in an entirely different direction. But if I were to add to this, what I would say is that those the knowledge and those skills need to go somewhere. They need to have a meaningful impact, a meaningful contribution to the organization, to the lives of people, whether it's even the people around you in your home, in order to be meaningful and go beyond just here, a cerebral exercise, so to speak. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the cerebral exercise. It's just that if we really want to be valuable, and if we want to, again, to go back to the question, if we want to be promotable, then we need to be able to show how what we've learned here and here brings something valuable to the table and makes it impactful.
Definitely. Nice. Thank you.